Uber driver, why won't you help me? By you/Josephine. Me and my wife had recently moved into our first house, and we had just had our first baby. To make some extra money, I had started driving for Uber a few times a week. Anyway, I got a hit and started driving to the pickup location, which turned out to be an extended stay America hotel. I've picked up people from these sort of locations before, and some of them have been very unique individuals. I pulled up out front. The notification was sent to his phone that I had arrived. I waited a minute or two at the front entrance where I had presumed that he was going to be emerging. The sun had only just started to set, so the visibility was pretty good. I noticed the bushes and foliage starting to rustle next to the entrance, about 10 foot from the side of the building. A man emerged. And when I say emerged, I literally mean that he must have taken a running jump because he burst through the bushes or tree line and landed 2-footed. He was around 40, slim built, and had a spring in his step which was noticeable. He wasn't dirty or unkempt in any way, so I just presumed that he was in there having a smoke or something. He had awful teeth and his skin was very pale, but either way, him emerging from the bushes so dramatically was strike one. He got in the car and we greeted each other. He was immediately very chatty and started telling me about all aspects of life without asking or letting me get a word in. He told me that he just got back from a business trip. No, obviously he didn't, and that he had been kicked out of his house because he had been away on business for so long. We were on our way to his house so that we could pick up a few things and then head back. Delightful. He started asking me about myself, but between every new question, he would ask me again what my name was, to which I told him, over and over again. He was in the back seat and I could feel him really close behind me, breathing heavily as I answered his questions in a guarded but friendly way. It sounds strange, but I am sure he was sniffing me. When he started to twitch, it dawned on me that he was tweaking. Not terribly, but enough where it was pretty noticeable if you were aware of the signs. That was strike two. We arrive at his house and I pull up into the driveway. He says he won't be long and that he'll give me a good tip when I take him back to the hotel. He gets out, I leave the car on, and lo and behold, he doesn't seem to have a key. After trying the basement entryway, a few windows, and kicking the door multiple times, he storms up to the outdoor staircase to the ground floor entrance. He starts aggressively trying to force the door while hurling a tirade of abuse at whoever he thought was responsible for this situation. A guy suddenly appears around the side of the house, presumably the bushes, and he shouts that he told him to never show his face here again and to give him his money. Within seconds, they were full-on fighting in front of my car. There's a large thud as the grappling duo land on the hood of my car and then roll to the ground. I zone out for a second, thinking, how the actual hell have I found myself in this situation? At this point, they were rolling around on the driveway, fighting in front of my car. The actual homeowner must have been winning because suddenly, the man that I had picked up started screaming at the top of his lungs. "Uber driver, help me! Uber driver, why won't you help me?" Over and over. The look of exasperation I must have had on my face. How can this dude not know my name? He asked me at least 30 times. That was strike 3. I calmly put my car into reverse and drove the hell out of there. I looked into my rear view mirror and they were still brawling. I have no idea what happened to the Uber passenger or the homeowner, but I went straight home thoroughly creeped out. And I've been driving for Lyft ever since. First Encounter with a Creepy Uber Driver by u/Helios. There was a time in my life where I used Uber a lot. I used it 3 or 4 times per week for 6 months. For me, that was a lot considering that I could use any other transport to get home. And during this time, I had at least 3 or 4 creepy encounters with Uber drivers. And by far, this is the creepiest encounter. I was 26 years old and I was going home from my girlfriend's house. It was Saturday night at around 10:30, and I greeted the driver, and he asked the common stuff. "How are you?" And so I then replied and asked back. Everything was fine for the first 5 minutes, until we passed a bump, and the car jumped up abruptly. The driver then said, "Oh, sorry for that. Would be a shame if you hurt yourself hitting the roof with that bump, because, a lot of blood would come out from your head and the back seat would be covered in blood." The comment was completely out of the blue, so I just said, "Yeah, but that didn't happen." Then, he drove over a pothole. The car shook again significantly, and he said another creepy comment. "Oh, sorry again. That could have made your head crash against the window. You would break it and have a serious and messy cut on your head." This time I felt quite anxious and just replied, "Well, that was not the case." So everything was feeling really strange and uncomfortable at this point until we came across some road workers crossing the road, ignoring the green light. He then added this awful comment, "Look at those bastards. They just crossed ignoring the green light. Really stupid. I hate stupid people. Trust me, if I had a gun with me right now, I would shoot them." I just tried to ignore that comment because it was completely out of context and he was overreacting. He made another 2 comments about other drivers and how they were driving that night, and how useful weapons are to teach people a lesson. When we finally arrived home, he finally said, "This road is really dark and lonely. If you would be in danger, nobody would be able to help you." That final sentence made me shit myself, and I realized that there was a high chance that this driver would do something to hurt me. Thank God nothing happened, and I just said thank you and good night and got off the car. I then opened the main door of the building and locked it really quickly. He waited for some minutes outside the main door of the building. I noticed this because I was hiding behind the first wall of the stair area, and he waited outside for 5 minutes or so. I reported the whole incident with Uber, and they sent me back the usual response. But actually, nobody contacted me back about the incident. Of course, I rated the driver with the lowest score. When I was in college, I found myself doing Uber to make money. This was in Southern California, and LA at that time was a constant flow of work. Occasionally, you'd pick people in a nice area, and they would tell you that they were sleeping with someone in a relationship, or that they themselves were cheating. This was depressingly common, and I think that saying what they were doing to someone gave them a weird kind of relief. Once, I drove someone from Hollywood to Hammond, California, and he was very charming and funny. When I dropped him off, it was at a big blue building that they buzzed us into. He left me a $200 cash tip. I later found out that this was what is known as gold base for the Church of Scientology. If you don't know what that is, it's a completely normal, not weird at all in any way location owned by the Church of Scientology, so feel free to Google it. A few months into my Uber career, insurance companies started using rideshare service, and some people who were more down on their luck would use it. Sometimes, this was people just trying to get their kids to school. But sometimes, it was much sadder. I can't tell you how many times I showed up to a doctor's office to see someone with accessibility limitations face drop at seeing my tiny car instead of a van like they needed. The people with substance problems were interactions that would stay with you. Once, I picked a man going to a dental appointment, and I drove him for about a half hour. He told me about how he used to run drugs in the 90s until they caught him with a few pounds of coke. He told me about when he was moved from Nevada to Florida for trial, how he traveled handcuffed in a van, and how the cops would stop only once a day at McDonald's, and for their $1 menu item of the day. He asked me to stop at a liquor store, and he chugged a tiny bottle of booze, shoved mints into his mouth, then sipped on a soda. He smelled like pure alcohol when I dropped him off at the dentist. And near my house, there was a methadone clinic. I would get up before dawn to be able to take those rides. Early bird gets the worm, right? And almost always they were sweet and thankful. Sometimes, they were a little out of it, but I never felt in danger or anything like that. Some good people going through tough times. These rides were the most consistently depressing. People who were going to court clearly drunk or high. Older women who had trouble requesting a ride and had been waiting in the parking lot of their dialysis place into the night. They'd tell you their stories sometimes. A person who was going to court for a child custody case. People struggling with mental illness. Some mornings were exhausting. But being up that early, you'd hit another crowd that I had never anticipated. Funeral goers. The saddest funeral ride was when a man and a woman got into my back seat. Rather than speaking to me, the man handed me a neon printout of a map of a cemetery with instructions on what plot to go to, with a note written on the back of it that says, "Hello, I am attending my father's funeral. My wife and I are deaf, just please follow these directions." The whole ride I could hear them signing to one another and trying not to cry. There were also the retired gamblers. They would leave their houses at 7 in the morning, take a $70 Uber out to the desert, and spend the whole day gambling at the reservation casinos. The desert is where I saw the weirdest things. The desert was the only place that I have ever felt scared of driving. It was in Temecula, the wine country of SoCal. Lots of wooded roads and desert, and I picked up a lady just off the freeway at what I initially assumed was the edge of a golf resort. It was an unpaved access road. It was late and the area was especially dark. I was getting ready to call the passenger, and I saw them coming down the unpaved access road. It was a tall, blonde woman in a very nice pantsuit. She was absurdly put together, considering she had walked God knows how long in heels down a dirt rock road. She got into the car and was very pleasant. She said she lived in a gated community that was hard to get Ubers to, and it was easier to send me to the access road. I thought it was weird, but I did not want to be creepy asking her about where she lived. She was friendly, chatty even, and she was going to a dinner party. And as she spoke to me, I could feel her looking at me in the rearview mirror for the entire ride. We drove a half hour away from the freeway to one of those rural chic neighborhoods that you would hear celebrities had huge parties at. Eventually, we reached the address, which was a paved road lined with trees. She told me to keep driving, and I didn't think much of it because, again, we were in a mansion-style neighborhood. We hit a white ranch-style fence after a minute or so going down the road. That was when I started to feel a bit uneasy. There were around a dozen no trespassing signs and one of those classic "forget the dog, beware of the owner" signs with a guy pointing a pistol at you. I thought it was more than a little blunt to have that many signs, but hey, it's not my property. We drove for about a minute when we came to another fence. It was at the top of a hill and it overlooked a barn with some lights in the distance. I know this sounds weird, but it wasn't pleasant. I couldn't put my finger on it. It was just a barn with what looked like a barbecue going on, but being out in the woods without any light had freaked me out. The passenger told me that I could just slide the gate open, and as I approached the fence, I saw some signs that made me stop cold. Off to the side of the gate, not quite in the dark, but on the fringes of my headlights, there were metal signs with bullet holes through them, swastikas, and Confederate flags brightly displayed. SoCal has a lot of white supremacist pockets, and I had dropped off dozens of passengers in cities like Norco and driven down streets with people drinking in the garage, and a Nazi flag proudly hung behind them. It wasn't my favorite, but I wasn't spending any time in those neighborhoods more than I needed to. This was different though. It was after 11 at night, and I had no idea where I was. I opened the gate, and down the road I saw what I assumed were cell phone flashlights lighting up and coming up the incline. This made me very uncomfortable, and I went back and I told the woman that I didn't think my car could make it back up the hill if I went down it. "What are you talking about? Just take me, it's right there." She was getting more heated, and I could see the lights slowly make their way up the hill. She kept telling me that I needed to cancel the ride and that she wouldn't pay to not be taken the entire way. I told her the pin I was supposed to take her to was a mile back up the road, but I was so nervous I relented and canceled on my end. She slammed the door as she got out. I took off before I could see the cell phone light people get closer. The road back was much rougher at the speed I was going at, and I felt a bump that felt like I hit a body, but I kept going. My car was driving like shit, but I kept driving till I was past the fence, out of the rich neighborhood, until I stopped at a gas station. My right rear tire was fucked up and I needed to change it. There was a few nails that looked like they had been attached to a piece of wood on my tire, and I was freaked out so hard, and sometimes I wished that I had called the cops and reported it. But of course, all that happened was I got a flat on a back road, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my night waiting on a cop car. I know it's far more likely that I freaked myself out than a bunch of Nazis planning to mess with a random Uber driver. But when I picked up a well-dressed businesswoman from a remote location and dropped her off of a separate remote location, it gives me chills that I have trouble explaining to this day. So a few years ago, I worked at a grocery store as the manager for the online shopping department. I didn't have a car at that time, and so I would take Ubers to work occasionally. The night before this incident, I was at the local brewery with my friends, and I took an Uber home then. I thought the driver was kind of off because of how inquisitive he was, but I played it off as him just making small talk. The next morning, I requested an Uber, and it was the same guy. No big deal, it happens all the time here because I live in a small town. So I got in the car, and this guy remembered everything about me. But again, I played it off because I literally saw him like 12 hours before that. But I was definitely getting creeped out though. So we started chatting again, and he was telling me about how him and his wife were having problems. I thought it was weird as hell, but I figured that maybe he just wanted to talk about it because that's just my personality. Then he started talking about how they used to ride four-wheelers together and stuff, and how he misses it, and I stupidly said, "I've always wanted to ride one. Are they fun?" And he said, "They're great. You should definitely ride sometime. I have a few." I got sketched out and was like, "Oh, cool. I should see if my boyfriend would be down to ride sometime then." Finally, we got to my work and he gave me an awkwardly long goodbye speech and thanked me for using Uber. About an hour later, my coworker and I heard knocking on the door that leads to the pickup space, and it was the Uber driver. I awkwardly opened the door, and my coworker that I'll call Steve luckily came up behind me because I was like, what the fuck? The driver asked me to exchange numbers with him because he wanted to take me for a ride. Yikes. Luckily, Steve was like, "Dude, I'm her boyfriend. What the hell, man?" And then we closed the door. Steve was an absolute champ. He didn't leave. We had to page my boss, and then he had to call the cops because he wouldn't leave. He ran off when the cops showed up. It was super creepy, and I contacted Uber, got a refund, and also got a pretty strong confirmation that he no longer works for the company. Creepy Inappropriate Uber Rider by U/Ellie Rex. So I am temporarily driving for Uber while we're slow at my salon due to the virus. Today, I picked up this older guy, at least my dad's age, around 53. Things started out fine with some small talk. Then he mentions how I'm the cutest Uber driver he had. Mind you, I had a nappy bun straight out of bed, no eyebrows today, and my natural brows are very light and a mask on. He then proceeds to ask if I have a boyfriend, to which I reply, "No, I have a girlfriend." So he tells me about his son that's gay and shows me a picture. So I ask if he's married. He then tells me that he's not married anymore, but he was, and his kids' ages are very close to mine, and that he has a girlfriend and they're swingers. Not sure why he mentioned the swinger part, but then it got weird. Right before we got to his stop, he started asking if I was completely lesbian, and I told him yes, and he asked why. I simply say that I didn't like any part of being in a relationship with men. He then asked me pull into the back of a building where there were no other people, just a bunch of Park 18-wheelers and trailers. When I pulled into his destination, he asked randomly if he can show me a video without no context, and I say sure, not thinking anything of it. And he then shows me a snippet of a homemade porno of himself and his girlfriend. I won't say what was in the video, but it was disgusting. And then responds with, "Isn't that so goddamn hot?" You could see all over my face that I was uncomfortable, and at this point, we were already at his location, and he wouldn't get out. He continued to try and ask me inappropriate questions, saying, "Well, what's the difference between a strap-on and the real thing?" And at that point, I was like, I gotta go. Thankfully, he got out on his own without me having to be hostile. I was trying to avoid being hostile because we were in my car alone and he was a tall man and I'm very petite. And with all the crazy people in the world, I didn't want to take a chance of upsetting him and it turning violent. Before I shut my door, he says, "I'd love to talk to you some more, if that's okay with you. Don't tell your girlfriend what I showed you." I said bye, have a good day, and then drove off. I reported him to Uber, and they have been in touch with me. Fake Uber Driver by u/WomIntrovert84. A couple of years ago, my husband and I attended an Eagles concert in Little Rock, Arkansas. Being from Arkansas ourselves, we are fairly familiar with the area and had visited several times despite living on the other side of the state. The Eagles are without a doubt my favorite band, so we stayed until the very last note was sung and chord was strummed. We stumbled out with the other thousands of fans, starstruck and dumbfounded by their mastery of such moving music. And me, partially stumbling due to the imbibement of alcohol. My husband doesn't drink, which may have played an important role in the events of the night. When we finally exited the arena, we realized we were in for quite a wait. It was already close to 1 a.m., and everyone in sight was on their phones, ordering Ubers and Lyfts and taxicabs. We ourselves had arrived via Uber, but despite a generous bribe, we could not convince the driver to pick us back up where he dropped us off before the show. We each began contacting the rideshare services, only to be met again and again by ride canceled. We were tired, we were hungry, and we were getting annoyed with each other for no apparent reason. I suppose it's human nature to become angry with the person closest to you when you find yourself in an unpleasant situation. Anyway, we were standing there, stumped, when a white car pulled up to us, rolled down the window, and a very pleasant-looking and sounding lady in her late 20s or early 30s asked us if we called for a ride. Without even asking any questions, my husband said yes, pulled open the back door, and shoved me in the back seat. Despite being the drunk one, I wasn't overly thrilled with the situation that I had suddenly found myself in. Although the lady's car was certainly nice and clean, as Uber cars typically are, I could find no identification of any kind to prove that she was indeed legitimate. She asked where to, and my husband gave her the name of the hotel we were staying at, which was probably about 7 or so miles away. Our driver was very chatty and charming, making small talk about the concert and about her children, as pleasant as she can be. Then, suddenly, she mentioned that she didn't accept payments through Uber, and it was a cash-only transaction. This was shady as shit, and at that moment, I knew we were in a potentially dangerous situation. My husband, seemingly unaware, said confidently that we weren't carrying any cash and had all been spent at the concert. The driver helpfully stated, "No problem, I can stop at a gas station with an ATM." And before we knew it, she was pulling into just such a place in a, let's say, unsavory part of town. How she just so happened to know that this establishment held an ATM, I'll leave for your consideration. My husband got out and headed inside to get the $40 in cash she cordially demanded, and while he was out of the car, she continued with her pleasant conversation, inquiring about our lives and children and what we do for a living. My answers were short and clipped, and I kept straining to see where my husband was. Finally, he came out with the cash and handed it to the driver when he got back in the car. It was at this point that her attitude totally changed. She dropped her friendly demeanor and began speeding erratically in the direction of our hotel. She had nothing to say to us after this point and barely stopped long enough for us to open the door and get out when we finally reached our hotel. After the shock wore off a bit and we had some pizza, we decided that this woman was likely part of a robbery ring that picked up tired, drunk people who weren't in their right minds. Then, once she got them in the car, she informed them that she only takes cash. Knowing that most people don't carry cash anymore, she would then have a perfect excuse to stop at a gas station where the rest of her crew would be waiting to stick a gun in the back of whoever she sent inside the ATM. Luckily for us, my husband is 6'3", almost 300 pounds, and has a concealed carry permit that allows him to carry anywhere in our state. We suspect that her cohorts in the gas station took in all those three facts and realized that it was not in their best interest to approach my husband in a violent manner. We believe that the woman was angry once she realized that the only thing she would be getting out of us that night was the $40 in cash for the ride from the arena to our hotel. When I look back on it now, I thank whoever deserves thanking that things didn't get out of hand and turn into a gun battle or a car chase. But most of all, I think, hey, fake Uber driver in a white car, fuck you. Shrooms and a Bad Uber Driver by u/LazyVor. My friend and I had decided to see some SoundCloud artists while I took shrooms and she on Molly, not realizing what a bad duo that would have us in. I hear the people from the venue say the SoundCloud artist we came for wasn't coming anymore. I got pretty bummed out about it, but not enough to completely shift my mood. I start seeing things like little shadow monsters on the ground that were actually just flyers, and the atmosphere in there was just not it. I apologized to my friend that I wanted to leave, and she said it was completely fine. I asked how she was planning on spending the rest of the night, and tells me that she'd call her sister to get her soon. So I felt okay to call an Uber home. I get in my Uber and a guy gets in on the other side. I found this in no way weird since I was in San Francisco and it was a Friday night. He says hi and asks how my night is going, and I say it's fine and that I was just at the DNA lounge. I start shivering at this point and the talking stops. We enter the freeway, and I swear my Uber driver's window is rolled down, so I ask him if he could please roll up his window. I see the guy on the other side of the car do a little slide way of me and started looking at his phone. He gets dropped off and now it's just me and my Uber driver. I'm completely worrying about what I said earlier and apologize for asking him to roll up his windows. He says nothing. I notice my exit coming up and he misses it. A little panicked, but I've had other Uber drivers miss my exit before, so I'm just telling myself to calm down. My Uber driver then apologizes, and then I say it's fine. This exit just led to another street down the other side of my house. But then, he misses my street again and enters back into a freeway. At this point, I screenshot my Uber ride info, ready to send it to anyone. My Uber driver apologizes again and asks if I'm familiar with this road. He doesn't know I am actually really good with streets, and to which I reply yes, that this leads back to where he took the first exit and the lane he was on merges. I'm freaking out at this point because his phone with instruction is right there on his dash. He says he is sorry and could cancel the ride if I want, allowing me a free ride home, and I said no, that it's okay. He's pulling the ride info, getting ready to cancel, and I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm literally less than a mile away from home. That's the end of the story. I get home, and that was my first time doing shrooms. Story by u/Nurse KA. One evening, as I'm on my computer just browsing Facebook, I happen to get a message notification. Thinking it's one of my friends or family members, I click on the notification to open up the message, as I have my profile blocked from people that I don't know so they can't message me. It's from an elderly man who doesn't live in the same town as me, and he tells me that I'm very beautiful. I just reply with a thanks and leave it at that. I should have never even replied because he immediately replies with, "Are you single?" When clearly in my profile picture, there is my boyfriend of 3 years and I embracing, which is kinda obvious, you'd think. Anyway, I reply with a no. He replies with a shame, and I end up blocking him and going to bed. The next morning I'm opening and I'm alone. It's dark out as it's only 5 a.m. We don't open for another hour when I hear a, "Hello, you're looking as beautiful as ever this morning." I turn around expecting one of the co-workers from the grocery store that my kiosk is placed in to be just messing around with me. But to my horror, the elderly man was there. He lives in a town that is a whole 1.5 hours away from me. The fact that he drove all that way just to see me terrified me. I went and told my manager about it, and he told me to go to the back room and he would come get me when this guy was gone. It took a while, but my manager finally came out and got me. The guy, after I disappeared, ended up walking the whole store multiple times trying to find me, and even asking associates if they had seen me from Starbucks around and that he needed to talk to me. My manager quickly told the gentleman that he was worrying his employees and that it would be best if he left before he had to call the cops. Needless to say, he hasn't spoken to me, but I do occasionally see him lurking about the store. Story by u/Ivy Alien. I decided to use a Starbucks gift card that I got for Christmas this one morning before class. I live in a college town, and I wanted to go to the Starbucks closest to campus, so I wasn't late for class. This one doesn't have a drive-through window, so I had to walk in. When I walked up to the front door, a man and a woman were sitting at the outdoor table, and they both made eye contact with me. I remember thinking it was kind of odd because they looked me up and down. Plus, it's like 30 degrees and there were clearly open chairs inside. And come to think of it, they didn't even have drinks or anything. I walked inside and ordered my drink like normal, but I could still feel them staring at me through the front window. And once I got my drink, I started to walk out to my car, passing the two people. I heard both of them stand up and start walking behind me without saying a word, and I got really scared and put my car keys in between my knuckles, just in case that I needed to protect myself. I sped up and got into my car as fast as I could and then locked all of the doors. And not even 2 seconds later, the woman knocked aggressively on my driver's side window, essentially making me damn near piss myself. The man was right next to her with a straight face, hands in his pocket, looking through the windows of my car as if he was searching for something he wanted. I cracked the window like a centimeter so she couldn't fit her hand in or anything, and asked her if she needed anything. And she told me to roll the window down more. I just said it was really cold, so I'm going to keep it up. She then asked me if I could give them some money, and she seemed like she was insisting, not so much asking. I just stumbled over my words and told her that I paid with a gift card and that I'm just a poor college kid who didn't have cash, which was true, but it sounded like an excuse. The man started to look confused and angry at me, and he yelled at me to get out of the car. That's when I just noped the fuck out and drove away as fast as I could. I'm glad I got out of there, but they scared the crap out of me. I probably shouldn't have even talked to them at all. So, to the 2 people who I think tried to rob me at Starbucks, let's not meet again. Story by you/Savvy Noel. About a month ago, I took an Uber to Starbucks to wait for my now ex-boyfriend, as he can't pick me up at home for other reasons. Anyways, so I'm in Starbucks sitting at a table waiting for my drink. I have a strong resting bitch face, especially when I'm in public alone, and I'm only 5 foot tall and 100 pounds, so I'm tiny. I try to have it as strong as possible to keep creeps away. But this day, it didn't work, unfortunately. My now ex-boyfriend was at MEPS for the Navy, so I was having our friend pick me up. I am sitting there waiting, and this creepy guy comes up out of nowhere and introduced himself. I immediately tensed up as he sat down across the table from me. He tells me he didn't want to be weird because he kept looking at me, so he decided to talk to me and said that I seemed cool. He proceeds to ask if I'm in school because I had a backpack on, and I tell him no. He asks me if I work, and I say not at the moment. I try to be as short with him as possible while giving whoever I can the help me kind of look. He asked me if I'm local and if I drive, and I simply responded Uber. He asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I lied and said yes, I'm actually engaged and my fiancé is in the Navy. He looks down at my left hand, which thankfully I have a promise ring on. He tells me that he has military friends, and I didn't respond. I never made eye contact with him, but made mental notes of everything about him. He was average height and weight, with a narrow jaw and horrible brown teeth. He tells me he's a writer and is working on a book. He also offers me a ride, but I tell him no thanks and that I have someone coming to get me. He finally ends up leaving me alone after playing 20 questions. I get my drink and go outside to where I didn't think he could see me. I'm texting my friends, trying to have one call me. And the next thing I know, he comes up again and sits down across the table. He offers me a job, typing for him, and that he'd pay me $20 an hour cash. I decline, and he keeps going about how we can meet up so he can pay me and he can give me rides whenever I need. He also tells me how he's a photographer and web designer. I tell him I can't accept because my fiancé wouldn't be okay with it, and he's at work so I can't talk to him about it yet. He offers to leave me his number, so my fiancé can call him himself, and I told him that he would not be okay with it. He asked if he's strict, and I say no, that he's protective. He then says that I can give him my number instead, but I say that my fiancé would definitely not be okay with that. He tells me that he's not trying to break up my relationship, but he's just trying to help me out, and tells me how he has married couple friends. He finally leaves me alone after repeatedly saying that he wasn't trying to be weird, and I quickly leave and go somewhere else and hide in case he follows me. I never went back to that Starbucks again. I thought that would be the only time that I'd deal with his creepy ass, but I was wrong. He may not seem too creepy to some, but he had a very, very creepy vibe to him. So, this last Friday, I went to Target to wait for my now ex-boyfriend. The Target is in the same shopping center as the Starbucks, but I hadn't seen him, so I felt safe. I got bored, so I decided to sit outside. Well, that was my mistake, and that I should have stayed inside. So I'm sitting on a bench in front of a store, and I see someone out of the corner of my eye walking in front of me from my left side. I glance up and realize it's him. I immediately panic and text my friend so he can call me. I wanted to go back in the store, but he went in that direction. He stopped by the doors and just stood there for a good 5 or more minutes looking around before going in. I'm telling my friend to hurry and call me, but he's in the middle of something and says that he will call in like 2 minutes. As I am waiting, I see him coming back towards me. He spent like 2 minutes in the store. He walks past me and then comes back and comes up to me, and I get very nervous and scared. He makes up some excuse to talk to me. He says hello, and I say hi with as much attitude as I can and without looking up from my phone. He asks if he can ask me something, so again, with an attitude, I say, "What?" He quickly responds with, I'm new here and I'm looking for, never mind, sorry." And then walks away. Thankfully, at that point, my friend calls and we were on the phone for a good 45 minutes to an hour, and the dude disappeared completely. I mentioned to my friend that if he's around when my now ex-boyfriend gets to me, that he would handle it, and my now ex-boyfriend just got into the Navy, so he wouldn't put hands on the creep, but he is taller and is sorta muscular, so he'd scare the shit out of him. My friend ends up having to go, and as soon as we hang up, literally, in the same second the creep walks by again. He was waiting out of sight where he could hear me. It was 3:26 p.m., and my now ex-boyfriend got off work at 3:30. So I texted him and I told him the creep was around me, and I told him that I was going to call at 3:30 and to please answer. He hadn't seen my messages, but he answered, so I told him what happened and had him stay on the phone with me until he got to me, because I was really scared. The creepy guy walks back out of the store again only after 2 minutes inside. He goes and stands out of sight again, and I loudly say the word babe multiple times, knowing that he's listening. Next thing I know, he's walking away back to the Starbucks. My now ex-boyfriend gets to me. I was going to verbally beat the shit out of him. And of course, the coward is nowhere to be found. Needless to say, I am never going to that area alone. I saw him again a few months later, and he even followed my mom and I around Target with a hat on covering his face. But when I noticed him, he gave me the creepiest, evilest smirk and then walked away. I haven't seen him since, and it's been a few years now. So, Starbucks stalker, Let's not meet ever again, or I can guarantee that you'll regret it. Story by you/Silver and Cat. When I was a young chick, I worked for Starbucks for a while. Our store was in the shittiest part of town in a retail park. The area consisted of council flats, where the local council placed druggies, ex-cons, and people on various benefits. So, although we had some nice customers who were there for a shopping spree, there were quite a few shady people too. This guy came in and acted like a regular, asking every girl about how we are and etc. We had name tags. He was nice and chatty and made my skin crawl. The other girls loved him, and the guy started to come daily. He usually came around 1 p.m. and stayed until closing at around 11 p.m., and sometimes he was very pushy about staying even after closing. He always insisted on helping bringing in the outside furniture and stuff. Some managers and I were cautious, especially since we couldn't have anyone in the store after closing. He then started to pretty much groom the girls, asking about if we were single, our first boyfriends, favorite sex positions, and etc. Mind you, I grew up with narcissistic parents, so I learned how to read people at a very early age. Also, I've always been interested in psychology, and I did study it for a few years. This guy irked me from day one, but I was nice to him because I'm very passionate about not starving to death, so I needed the job. One day, he started to tell me that he had a fight with his parents and that they threw him out. He looked very sad and told me that he now needs to sleep in his van. However, since he knows that I'm closing that day, he'd love to take me home with his car because it's not the nicest neighborhood. I almost laughed. This was such a textbook way to abduct young women. He was doing everything just as my lecture said a serial killer or rapist would do. Sadly for him, I am not a normal girl. Thanks to my rather cruel upbringing, I scored extremely high on the psychopathy test. I just had to tell him once without my fake smile for him to notice that I am not prey. He moved on to the other girls and I notified the manager about his creepy behavior in order to protect our young girlies. One of them was a sweet, innocent, and a bit naive girl, and the creepy guy targeted her next, after my shift leader also laughed in his face. He told this young girl his sob story and expected empathy, which he got, and she agreed to be taken home by him, and she even offered him a couch to sleep on. Luckily, my manager was a mama hen type of a woman, and she firmly told our young barista to be more careful around strangers and that she will be going home with her. Also, creepy guy was banned from the store. The manager notified the security around the park. I'm afraid I don't have a happy ending to this story. All I know that the police was later involved somehow, and he disappeared from the area. So, creepy Starbucks guy who's after young innocent girls, let's not meet again. Starbucks is my favorite place to get coffee. Part of my morning ritual is to go there, get my coffee, and then go about my day. Like most of the population, I'm addicted to coffee. I'm not the friendliest person to talk to in the morning, and I can be standoffish. When my name was called out, and naturally it was spelled incorrectly, I had to squeeze past several men to get there. I tried doing the polite, "Excuse me," while I tried to move past, and one of the men didn't move. I gestured with my hand that I needed to make my way through. He moved, but just enough for me to get by and for me to rub against him. I cringed as I did so. He leaned in close, sniffed my hair, and made a creepy purr sound in my ear. I was completely repulsed by it. I grabbed my drink and made my way out as quickly as possible. I sipped it and smiled at the flavor when I heard a creepy voice in my ear. I have something else you can taste. It was the same creeper from before. His breath smelled disgusting and I pulled away from him. It was crowded and I don't think anyone heard what he said above the noise of the cafe. I stared at him in disgust. He leaned forward and winked at me. I pushed past him and made it out of Starbucks. I was angry at this point, but I didn't want one idiot to ruin my day. It was when I noticed that he was following me, and at first I didn't worry about it too much. It was a busy street, and he could have been heading to wherever he had been heading. But about 5 minutes in, I wanted to do a test and see if I was being paranoid about it. I turned into a street in the opposite direction of my school. The only other buildings was a small corner store and a beautician. 2 places that I didn't think he would go to. But he kept following me. I was starting to get so worried now. I wanted to run away screaming, but instead, I went into the beautician's and pretended like I was looking at the prices. He was waiting outside, and I leaned forward and whispered to one of the women that he was following me and that I was worried. At first, I don't think she believed me since he hadn't done anything yet. And I waited there for 10 minutes, and he was still waiting outside for me. She went outside and asked what the problem was. He didn't answer, and then walked away. After I saw he left, I hurried to get to school and kept looking behind me to see if he was there, and he wasn't. Every time I've gone to Starbucks, he hasn't been there, that I don't run into him again. Story by u/JillPod123. This happened about 5 years ago, so some parts are probably left out as I don't remember much. Backstory: my cousin, who was 13 at that time, lives with our family because of his unstable mother, who has trouble supporting them both. He's been living with us off and on for years, so I am very protective of him, as I see him more as a little brother than a cousin. One day, our laundry machine broke down, so my mom gave me cash and had me go down to the laundromat to do our laundry. I took my cousin with me for the extra help. Let's call my cousin Brax. This laundromat had several arcade games, including a fighting 2-player game that has the fighters transform into animals. I have no idea what it was called, but I gave Brax quarters to play on that game and occasionally joined him while waiting for the laundry to be done. Eventually, I ran out of quarters to give to him, so he had to sit with me while waiting for the laundry while playing games on my phone. When all the laundry was dry, I gave him the keys to unlock my car and then opened the trunk. He came back and I gave him the first laundry bin full of clothes and he went outside to the car with it. I then started filling the other laundry bin with clothes. And 2 minutes passed by and he hasn't been back yet. I was curious. We lived in a nice town, so I wasn't afraid for him, just curious about what took him so long. So, I went outside, and I see Brax talk to an old man. The old man was short and had about 5 white greasy hairs on his head. He was slumped over and had a stained white tank top, and he was smiling with crooked yellow teeth at Brax, and even from far away, smelled like death. I was immediately afraid that he was going to kidnap Brax, so I quickly walked over there. Once the old man caught sight of me, his smile quickly went away and his speech was slurred, and he looked visibly nervous. I went up to them and asked, "What's going on?" Brax smiled at me and said, "This man said he'll give me $5 if I take out his boxes in the back of his car. He said his boxes were too heavy to get out by himself. This means we can play that game again." His car was a really old worn-down station wagon, and the only access in his trunk was through the back window, which was open. The handle on the trunk was visibly broken, and when I looked in there, I could see that the boxes were pushed all the way in the back, so if Brax were to get them out, he would have to crawl in there and push them out. I was then convinced that he was gonna get kidnapped if I didn't stay. Since Brax had already said yes to the old man, I let him get out the boxes, all the while watching the old man like a hawk, ready to attack if he tried anything. I know, it was irresponsible of me, but at that time, I thought that I was right. As I was glaring at the old man with my arms crossed, he was getting more and more nervous and started fidgeting with his hands and avoiding eye contact with me. When Brax was done, the old man awarded him with $5. Then, he quickly picked up the boxes like it was nothing and practically threw them in the passenger seat of his car, and then drove away. I looked at Brax and asked, "How heavy were those boxes?" Brax replied with, "It felt like they were all empty." I was pretty pissed at Brax at the moment because he knew better than to go up to a creepy old man like that. So old man, let's not meet again. Story by u/Caddy64. This happened about 4 years ago. My daughters Addie and Alyssa were 9 and 4 years old respectively. We, along with my husband, lived in a rented small 2-bedroom house in a very small town. Unfortunately, both my washer and dryer broke within the same week, and I was forced to go to the laundromat for a few months. And on this particular day, I decided to take our week's worth of laundry there while the girls were in school, instead of going after supper, which was what I normally did. Once I arrived and hauled in the 3 big hampers, I realized that I was the only person there. If you've ever had to use the laundromat, you could imagine the utter joy I felt knowing that I'd be in my very own company. No strangers to make small talk with, no awkward silences, and no waiting for machines. It practically never happens, so I was stoked. Anyway, I'd brought a book to read, and time flew by in silence while my clothes washed. Once they were finished, I threw them all into dryers, still surprised and thankful that nobody else had come in. With all the counter space I had, I folded all the clothes into neat piles, each according to person. So I had piles stacked for each daughter, then my husband, and myself. I was still waiting on one last load of clothes to dry when I heard the ding of the front door opening. I looked over and watched a slim man with a heavy jacket walk in and go straight towards the vending machine. He had no laundry with him. At first, I thought he was just coming in to buy a drink or snack, but it became evident that something wasn't right with this man. He was mumbling to himself in an Irish accent, words that I couldn't make out but seemed to be angry in tone. He took off his jacket, only to turn around and put it back on. He did this several times, mumbling to himself the whole time. I'd make out words like, "that girl," and "looking at me," so I thought he could be speaking about me, and it made me very nervous. So I grabbed my purse and phone and went out the front door to have a cigarette. I called my sister and told her about the man and his strange behavior. We both agreed that he was either on some sort of drugs or had a mental illness, and she offered to meet me at the place so that I wasn't alone. But since my last load of clothes were likely dry by then, I told her that I was going to pack and leave. When I walked back into the laundromat, I breathed a sigh in relief when I saw that the man was no longer there. He must have walked out the back door. I quickly grabbed my clothes and started folding the last of them when I noticed that something was off. There was a pile missing. My 4-year-old's underwear pile had disappeared. I searched around for them, but they had vanished. That crazy man had stolen about 10 pairs of my little girl's underpants. What kind of sicko was that? I ran outside looking for him to chew him out, but he was long gone. I wanted to call the police on him, but I was due at the school in the next 15 minutes to pick my kids and just didn't have time to fill out a report. It amazes me how disgusting some individuals are in this world. So, crazy panty stealer from the laundromat, let's never meet again. Story by u/cuttinggirl78. After college, I had a low-paying job for a while, so I lived in a rough neighborhood. One sunny Saturday afternoon, I'm at a crowded laundromat. Since I brought all of my linens and comforter, in addition to the usual amount of clothes, several hours pass. By now, the sun is going down, and one by one, people are finishing up and leaving, until it's just me. It's now full dark outside and still about 40 minutes until my comforter will be dry when a huge man walks in. Even though I'm above average height for a woman, this guy is easily 6 inches taller than I am. And you guessed it, he doesn't have any laundry with him. The hair immediately stands up on the back of my neck, and I square up my shoulders to my full height and look at him with my best attempt at a bitch face, with the idea to convey something like, "Hey man, I will pick you out of a lineup." He must have taken this as some kind of invitation, because he starts saying really crass things while laughing and smiling and asking if I have a boyfriend. When I don't reply, he then starts walking around the island of washers in the middle of the room to get to me. At the same time, I'm walking around the other way, so we are no closer to each other. Unfortunately, this puts me at the back of the place out of view of any windows, and him closer to the door. He then flashes a big grin, and then locks the door. At this point, I'm plotting what to do next. My keys are in my pocket, and I can put my keys in between my fingers to try to use it as a weapon, or I can have my car key ready to unlock the door as fast as possible to get away. I decide to try and run for it since he has a major size advantage and would probably overpower me anyway, with my backup plan to cause as much damage to him as possible if he gets me anyway. Visualizing myself ripping out an eye or biting a chunk out of anything that I can reach. All of a sudden, he runs at the center of the island of washers and vaults over to try and grab me. I am in full flight mode now, and I swear I could feel my adrenal glands rocket out the adrenaline blast that must have had me set a land speed record. Somehow, in what felt like a millisecond, I'm at the door to the laundromat, lock unlocked, Out the door, at my car driver's side, car door unlocked, inside car, and ignition on. But he is there too, grabbing at my arm as I'm flooring it, peeling out, tires squealing, like a maniac with him still holding onto the door after losing grip on my arm. With my car door wide open still, but getting away, he's pounding on my trunk until I'm far ahead. And in my rear view, I see him still running after my car. This is pre-cell phones, and I drive to my friend's house, probably blowing through stop signs. I really can't remember the drive. I bang on my friend's door and she lets me in. I tell her what happened, and we call the police and I file an incident report. The police and my friend and I go to the laundromat to collect my stuff, and I finally go home. It turns out that the guy had a warrant out for his arrest for aggravated assault and some drug charges. And I never saw him again, and I hope no one else has either. Story by you/Alternative Study 45. Just a little context. I'm a female college student who recently moved into a house with a roommate. The house doesn't come with a washer or dryer, although we can rent one from the housing office. My roommate thought it would save money if we just went to a laundromat instead of paying like $35 per month. But after tonight, I'm going to be insistent that we get one. I think that's just the basics that you'll need for the story. Last night around 10 p.m., something happened that I need to do an emergency wash. I live in a college town, and near the campus, there are a couple of laundromat, and so I drove to one of those. I'm not sure why I chose this one, but I went based off memory and just ended up going to the one laundromat that's literally right off campus. You could walk a short distance and technically be on campus. While I was washing clothes, a friend Snapchatted me, and I saw that she was walking her dog on campus. I then loaded up everything that wasn't in the washer, and then I went to go see her. She ended up being with another friend, and we all ended up hanging out. After leaving Bethany and Tiffany, who I noticed didn't go straight home, I went back to the laundromat to switch my stuff over. It was going to be another 36 minutes, so I just decided to wait out there. Probably about 5 minutes in, my senses kinda perked up, like that feeling that someone else is in the room, even though you can't see them. Yeah, that, and lo and behold, a man walks through the back a few seconds later. The way the building is set up, there's a parking lot and a front room where there are some washers and small dryers, and a small doorway that leads to more washers and bigger dryers. I decided to set up in the back in hopes of finding a bigger washer to do one load, but I ended up doing 2 washing loads. Now, I'm kind of used to guys hitting on me, and so when this guy did it, I wasn't caught off guard. It doesn't happen often, but it happens enough. So I do my usual routine of lying about myself and stuff like that. Unfortunately, Mr. Blue Shirt was persistent, and so I had texted Betty to call me. So I'm using the phone call as an excuse not to talk to him, although that didn't stop him from trying. And while I'm on the phone, I'm trying to signal Betty to come to the laundromat. I could finally go outside under the impression of getting my laundry basket, and I straight up tell Betty to come. She and Tiffany weren't too far from me and came right away. And the entire time that I was on the phone, I stopped looking at Mr. Blue Shirt. I would pass by him occasionally, being he was standing in the doorway that connect the back room and the front room. However, I wouldn't even look at him. I would politely say excuse me, but wouldn't acknowledge him any other way. Betty and Tiffany finally showed up, but unfortunately, I still had 18 minutes left on the dryer. So we all just gathered around the dryer waiting, and I went back and forth between inside and outside. I updated them on everything going on while we were outside, and when the timer got to 10 minutes, we stayed by the dryer. While Tiffany and I had our backs to him, because I didn't even want to see him, Betty was watching him. She later said that he was just looking at us, listening and talking on his phone. Finally, my clothes dried, and while I was getting my stuff, I had casually mentioned how I'm glad that I lived near my friends, so we would be going the same way. Well, this was a lie. We literally live on the opposite ends of town, but I didn't want to go home and have Mr. Blue Shirt following me. And pretty soon, the three of us left and got in our car, and while we were leaving, Mr. Blue Shirt had followed us outside to his car. I was going to follow my friends back to their house, and as we back out the laundromat, we were at a corner where Mr. Blue Shirt was adjacent to us in his car. Betty refused to let Tiffany go until he had made a left turn, going in the opposite direction of us. We ended up going in crazy directions to their house until Betty had us pull over just to make sure nothing was attached to the car. And thank God, nothing was. I stayed at their place last night and was very thankful that they came for me. Betty just keeps saying that she's glad that I called them. I just really wanted to get this off my chest without feeling guilty. So, thank you so much for listening. This is the scariest thing that has happened to me so far. When I had went outside the first time after Mr. Blue Shirt showed up, I could not find a car. I later learned that he had parked on the side of the building. Something else that I had realized that made me think that I wasn't just being paranoid is that the whole time he was there, Mr. Blue Shirt didn't do a single load of laundry, nor touch any clothes. Story by u/Solar Opposites. A handful of years ago, my washing quit working, and as a mother of 2 young boys, this is practically a minor emergency. So, I pack us up and head to the nearest laundromat, boys in tow. The kids are being kids, watching the laundry go around in the machines, playing with their little cars that they brought in, etc. The owner of the laundromat, a middle-aged Asian man, comes out and starts talking to them. Not in a creepy way, but he's clearly entertained by them. He gives them small candies, a quarter for the little quarter machines and etc. I thought he was being nice until he started talking to me. He began telling me how lucky I am to have 2 boys, which I of course agreed with. But then he starts telling me how his wife only gave him daughters and how shameful it was to him to have daughters. At first, I think this guy is kidding around, but the resentment is practically erupting through his pores. He starts telling me how he wanted to find a new wife that would give him sons. And at this point, my husband walks in. I think he was nearby in the strip mall anyway, and stopped to see if I needed help. Does this deter the man? Not one bit. He actually congratulates my husband on having a wife that gave him sons, and starts lamenting to him all the woes of having daughters. I start packing everything and everyone up because it's honestly just getting creepy. And as we are leaving, this man says to my husband, "How much for her? I'll give you $10,000. We blow him off because surely he's kidding. And as I'm halfway out the door, he comes back with a higher offer, at which point my husband tells him to chill. We're very easygoing people, so We don't get all high-strung, and there were definitely some cultural differences that we didn't want to insult. But, laundromat man, I sure hope you learn to love your daughters. And also, learn that it's not your wife's fault for giving birth to girls. But let's not ever meet again. Story by you/Crunchy Leaves. This has nothing on some stories that I see on here, but it had my adrenaline full throttle. I'm a thin, athletic white guy, 5'9", and not the most intimidating presence. But I happen to have a nice bulky coat on that probably added some uncertainty. Also, my savior, because as mentioned, not a bear, would be my situational awareness. Anyway, story time. It's 2:30 a.m. or so, and it's my favorite time to do the laundry. There's a 24/7 auto-electronic laundromat right by my apartment. While there's employees there during business hours, there's roughly an 8-hour stretch where I'm the only one who will be in the building. And I'll occasionally see an old-timer at around 4:30 or 5 a.m., but usually only on Sundays, which I avoid. It's literally a half-mile from my place. I zip down there, and it's a cold night, well below freezing. I toss in my clothes, soap, and swipe the laundry card. And then I go on my way to grab gas, milk, deposit at the bank, and back to my apartment to bring some things inside from my car. I do some dishes, and then I decide to head back down. I'm usually playing a video game while running my laundry, or just procrastinate. My stuff will sit for up to an hour sometimes, and there's no one there, so hey. Well, not this time. It's now just shy of 3 a.m., and I get the notification that my laundry is done on my phone as I'm seconds from the laundromat parking lot. I pull in and scan the parking lot. No one here. I proceed to walk in the front door and immediately notice someone come into the building from the far side door. A guy, maybe 6 foot, with 2 hoodies on, both hoods up. Most of his face concealed. It's unlocked and often used when the place is busy. But there was no car there. There is a bathroom in the place though. As I walked to my machines, which is about dead center in the building, I thought this person had quickly bolted back outside. Then, I noticed him again. I think he ducked, still, just by the door. Mind you, we had 2 islands of laundry machines between us. He starts up the near wall, which is on my left, and I'm watching him at this point. I was hoping he'd needed to use the bathroom, but he hurried past it. Not a run, but a very quick walk, and now he's up on the opposite, nearer corner of the laundry machine strip. Maybe 15 foot away, and just out of my line of sight for a moment. I didn't want to trigger the guy who appeared scared, so I continued shoveling my wet clothes into the laundry cart. The adrenaline begins trickling, and the hair on the back of my neck goes up. Before rounding the corner and crossing back into my vision, he had hesitated. I eventually turned my head to rotate back, and he kind of popped into the picture. He glanced over, and we made eye contact as I reached into my coat pocket to fist my keys. He continues up the aisle and makes a left back outside the door. I have a little blade on my keys, so I popped that open and proceeded to toss my shit in the dryer, while scanning my surroundings the entire time. Eventually, the time came to go outside. The front doors are automatic, so I had both of my hands free, and I literally walked out of the place wielding a knife, shaking with adrenaline. But it was a ghost town. I proceeded to my car and then went home. I drove my wife into work and waited until about 6 to grab my clothes. My conclusion is that I'm nearly positive that this person scoped out the laundromat. My machine, which was all of them, has a digital timer for the current wash. This guy entered the building within a minute of it going off and me pulling into the lot at 3 a.m. a night when it was 20 Fahrenheit outside. Coincidence? Maybe, but I was scared either way. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.